Good afternoon, everyone. This is Esther Lopez, and I am the Project Director for Voices for Prevention. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today with Michael Haines. Some of you may have been on our webinar on Friday where he gave an overview of positive social norms. And today we're going to specifically talk about how to conduct positive social norms projects during the COVID-19 time. So we're going to go ahead and pass it on to Michael. Let me first, make a quick announcement. This is going to be more of a dialogue. And so after Michael goes over some of the slides, we're going to unmute everybody so that you may have a chance to ask a question to Michael. But if you're not going to be asking a question or participating, please everyone mute your phones, your computers, so that we don't have the feedback. I may have to go back on a couple times to remind people, but just so you know, once the time has come to have that dialogue, it'll be time for you to mute yourselves because right now everyone is muted. So again, we do have the question box or the chat box that you may write something in and I can read that, but everyone will be unmuted soon. So if you have any questions, please, you can ask Michael directly. So Michael, I'm going to send it to you now.
All righty. Hello, everybody. This is Michael Haines, and thank you for being here today. There's some assumptions I'm going to make as we start is that all of you who were on the webinar last Friday, raise your hand. Okay. And there are some of you who weren't on the webinar Friday, but had heard me do a training somewhere else at some previous time, last year or a couple of years ago. So those of you who did that, raise your hand. Good. I can't see any of you, so I'm making that all up. Anyhow, and there may be somebody on here who's never gone through a training with me, and you'll just have to run fast to catch up. But just for the sake of those who either had been in a training a while ago or have never been one, I'm going to very quickly go through the basics of social norms before we get started so we all start on the same page together. So bear with me, those of you who heard this Friday, because they're essentially the same slides. What are social norms? Of course, we have injunctive and descriptive norms. The injunctive norms are what we approve of or what we think ought to be, and the descriptive norms are that which already is. So descriptive norms you can think of as behaviors or perceived behaviors, and injunctive norms are the norms of our approval or disapproval of various behaviors. Okay, and how do social norms work? That our perceptions of behaviors or our perceptions of approval or disapproval of behaviors within society affect us and our behavior. So obviously changing those perceptions changes behavior. In the case of all of us, we're working with essentially high school or middle school age, some college age people to try to change their perceptions of the norms around substance abuse issues and thus change their substance taking behavior or reinforce their non-taking behavior as the case may be. And simply stated, the social norms formula is identifying the assets, the positive practice, protected practices, healthy beliefs, safe places that are already within populations, and then to model and promote those to grow more of them. So we're essentially focusing on how full the glass is, exposing people to that information in order to fill the glass up even more. And this social norm approach, the formula and the like, are described in this Guide to Social Norms, Marketing of Social Norms for Health Promotion in Schools and Communities, which you can get from Esther. Is that right, Esther?
Yes, we have all of this online, and I will type in the webpage on the chat box so everyone can see it.
Very good. Of course, I won't go through the whole model today. That's what we did in the workshop on Friday. Mostly we'll be concentrating today on the data collection stage and the implementation stage, because those are the two that are most affected by the coronavirus situation. So let me just reiterate what social marketing is all about. It's the product, price, place, and promotion that are the 4 Ps of marketing in general. Our product is essentially not going to change. What we're selling or our message stays the same. So whatever you're funded to do and the messages that you have or are developing around your funded objectives is going to remain the same regardless of the coronavirus issue. So you've seen this slide, many of you, before. The risk behaviors, we turn that around and look at how full the glass is and then develop messages based on these data so that we tell the overwhelming majority of Georgia teens are drug-free and feel safe at school. Vaping is rare, 90% don't use alcohol or marijuana, and so on. So that or messages like that will continue to be the same throughout the coronavirus impact on our projects. So just as a reminder, there is the message development checklist. You're still going to have many different messages, one idea, and so on. So none of this is really going to change. The beware the messenger is still going to be an issue we might have to deal with more so as we talk today. So let me go and talk a little bit about price. The last time I had this slide up, it had privacy, time, power, and identity. I added access and effort skill today because during the coronavirus issue, there's probably going to be a greater likelihood that people will have to use or try to use computers, social media, Zoom, webinars, you name it, in order to access our messages. At least that'll be one of the possible media channels. And that requires both access. People have to have the ability to be able to connect to the internet in order to do that. And then they have to make some effort or have some level of skill to be able to deal with the technology. And so that's going to be another cost in terms of reaching our audience. And we'll have to keep that in mind because we want to minimize cost wherever we can in terms of time or privacy or effort or skill or access or so on. So that'll be something we'll have to keep in mind as we talk about things. The other place that's going, the other P, which is place, that's going to be significantly affected in terms of trying to do a social norms intervention with schools closed during the coronavirus outbreak is the place that the marketing occurs, the messaging occurs. We no longer have the school physically as part of our place where we can interact with our target audience. And that's a major and very significant change that we're going to have to deal with as we talk about things today. The audience may change a bit as well, because in many of our projects, the primary audiences that we are addressing are users or potential users, young people themselves, to try to reduce the likelihood of their use, change their behavior. We might have to employ teachers and parents as part of our population that we're trying to address, given the constraints that we have to deal with the coronavirus. So from there, I want to pretty much throw this open to brainstorm, where I and you all will try to figure out how we go about accomplishing our mission, meeting our objectives, complying with our funders' requests or expectations, in spite of the fact that the schools are closed. I have some ideas that I'll bring up to talk about that. And let's see. One of the first of those is to talk about the types of media channels, which is slide number 20. Right, types of media channels. This is a slide that I often have in workshops. some of these media channels are not going to be available to us. Placemats and table tents in cafeterias are not going to be useful. Having faculty members or other students wear buttons to communicate messages is not going to work either. Radio and TV is generally out of the question for most of us unless it's in-school radio or TV, which of course is not going to be effective either. So it really reduces the media channels that we have available to us. We have direct mail being things like postcards or letters that could go home. We have social media. We still have the ability to have banners, billboards, perhaps even posters in places within the community, and we can talk more about those as we move along here. To find out what are the media channels, we're going to have to gather information from our target audience to some degree. I imagine we could just brainstorm on our own, but there is danger there unless we test our assumptions as to which media channels are most effective with our target populations, those we're trying to reach. I'm going to stop for a minute and see if people have some ideas or thoughts or questions, challenges that you're facing right now that we could address. So I need someone to ask me a question, make a comment, or participate.
Well, so far I haven't seen any questions here. Marcio, please feel free to unmute everyone. And I can start, Michael, while people are unmuted. I know that social media is a big media type of channel to use, especially now. And it's one of the things that Takoya and I, who is the project director now for the ASAP, which is the Underage Drinking Initiative in Region 1 for the council, we were talking about using or partnering with the schools still, but using their social media platform, because obviously they have a lot bigger platform and are more connected with the kids. They're still, you know, communicating with the kids doing school. So somehow communicating with the school. Michael, can you hear me?
Yep, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just wondering if anyone else is hearing me. Yes, okay, we've gotten some responses, yes. So that's an idea that we had is continue that partnership, but then, because our social media isn't as big, we're using their social media.
Right, well, that's feedback on somebody's speaker, that's all that is.
Yes, but again, if you can mute yourself until it's time to speak, that would be very helpful.
Oh, am I not muted then?
No, someone was just speaking now.
But if you have a question or a comment, please add it. What Esther was talking about was using the existent social media that schools or school districts are using to communicate with their students as they try to continue to have a curriculum electronically, which I think is an excellent media channel to use because it's already there. The school is already using some type of my granddaughter's school is using Remind Me, which is an application that the school district has that they're using to communicate homework assignments and other things with students and their parents. One of the things that's changed under the coronavirus situation is that the school is not only communicating on a daily or weekly or regular basis with students directly with social media, but also with parents to some degree. And so suddenly we have more of a triad than we usually do in the normal school setting, where high school and middle schools, it's mostly teachers communicating with kids. Now we have teachers, kids, and to some degree, given the school, parents involved as well. So I think we have three target audiences we're trying to reach. That would be parents, teachers, and kids themselves, because the parents and teachers could be additional carriers of our messages. But the first one that is most important is the one that Esther was just suggesting, which are whoever the school personnel are that are communicating, which I'm assuming are faculty. We need to find allies among those faculty who might have time to communicate our messages, or through the principal or the guidance counselor, whomsoever might be able to carry our messages through their regular channels to the student body. Does that make sense?
It does. And I actually have a comment here from someone. It says, with school utilizing their Google Classroom, evaluation is the part that is a bit more challenging, as we used to do that in person in the cafeteria. We are preparing to send out our survey via Google Classroom, but the challenge is school may be out before we deploy, so we are looking at sending the survey out via social media.
Wow, yes, that was one of the things that we could be talking about too under data gathering or information gathering, which is an important part of a social norms intervention. I had a call from Victoria some 3 weeks ago or so about her grant call for her to do focus groups with kids in the school, and there were no kids in the school. So she was wanting to know how to do that online through Zoom, and we had a good discussion, and I was pleased to hear her Friday in our webinar say that the focus group went very well using Zoom for her group with the kids. And essentially, she followed the same focus group checklist and rules that we would ordinarily use in conducting an in-person focus group, and it worked really well. So an alternative to doing a SurveyMonkey or a Google survey of students would be perhaps to do focus groups. That's a qualitative rather than quantitative way to gather information, but can still be very useful, especially if you can conduct 2 or 3 focus groups of 8 to 10 kids each. You don't want to make it any greater than 8 or 10 because it would just get out of hand. But if you keep it as a small group, you can elicit a lot of information about things like media channels. The kids can tell you how to reach them, what they're currently using, what they're using on a daily basis, what types of media channels like email blasts or whatever they wouldn't respond to or would delete without reading, and so on. So I think the focus groups still are very important, and may even be more important during COVID-19 coronavirus situation, because we've got, in a sense, a new playing field, and we have to learn from our target audience how to reach them. And that's just one type of information gathering. Besides that, we had that information gathering checklist back in the workshops that talk about focus groups and surveys and interviews and the like. You can do personal interview with students as well. Let's see, that's this one. We obviously can't do classroom sampling or intercepts in cafeterias or whatever. We can still do surveys, as someone was recommending there, with SurveyMonkey or other online survey methodologies. We can do focus groups, and we can do interviews. So those are the primary ways we're going to be able to gather information from our market, our target audience, about how we're going to reach them, or how to test messages, but primarily how to reach them, because we're in a whole new situation there. Questions?
So
comments?
I put it in the box there. I don't know if everyone is able to do this, but our administrator, the webinar administrator, unmuted everyone. And so if you're having trouble speaking or being heard, I think you have to unmute yourself now. So again, if you have a question, you can either type it in the question box or try to unmute yourself, and you can ask Michael his question. In the meantime, Michael, another issue that we have been thinking about, if you have a community that has several school districts or several schools, and your message obviously ideally is either school specific or a school system, right, for the entire school system, and you're now moving to a more social media type of platform, that may conflict in the sense of the messages are different. And in some instances, the school districts obviously don't want to be in competition, or the schools won't want to be in competition. So if you have a school system with, let's say, 2 different high schools, and one high school, I don't know, has 80% of past 30-day use or non-use, and the other school has 90%, that may have a conflict there. Do you have any suggestions or ideas on how any changes that can be done in order to avoid some of those problems?
Right. That question comes up frequently anytime we have a project which is trying to address multiple schools simultaneously, because you don't want to get into our school's better than your school, or who's the worst school in the district when it comes to vaping or marijuana use or alcohol use. And so that's where we have to be careful about using numbers themselves. If we have 90% at one school and 80 or 82% at another school, the obvious message that's still there is the overwhelming majority are not using X. Whether it's 85% or 92% or 80% or 79%, the overwhelming majority have made the decision not to use. So rather than talk about the 72 or 89 or 90 or 95%, we use words like almost everybody, or the overwhelming majority, or kids at XYZ school have made good choices to avoid, so that we make more general statements that still point to the same conclusion, which is that it's normal not to use. Most kids aren't using, and so on. And we do that without having this, using the specific numbers. And that gets away from that. The only caveat I would have is if you'd have schools that were so vastly different, that one had a rate of 32 and another one had a rate of 85, you can't make a general statement that the overwhelming majority or most. But that happens so very rarely. It usually only happens if you're dealing with, say, a public school situation in some sort of special private school that pre-screens their students on the basis of religiosity or developmental disability or income or something along those lines. But otherwise, you're going to find that the schools in a given county or region have pretty similar numbers, and you can then generalize with statements. Is that clear?
Yes, I think so.
Do we have questions or comments from others? Challenges that you're dealing with? Come on, somebody has one.
I was going to say, yeah, the whole reason we're doing this.
I know you're out there. Has anybody had success using some channels right now during the coronavirus restraints?
Hey, Michael, this is Kay Manning.
Yes, hi, Kay.
Hey, so a challenge that we've faced, because who I'm working with are 18 to 25-year-olds, and we aren't able to conduct our next focus groups because we always do those live. We offer gift cards to get incentive to get them to come, and so that's kind of put us at a standstill for moving forward with new messaging. Have you heard of any creative ideas around getting focus groups together during this time?
Well, with schools, First, I'll talk about the easy way, and then I'll address your issue, Kay. With schools, you can access kids, or at least have the opportunity to solicit or recruit kids through the school itself. So a school personnel can say there's a focus group's going to be occurring at such and such time, or an information session. Would you give them this amount of time on this date, and you can get this in return? Or you just even have the school directly say, we'd like you to do this afternoon instead of this assignment, and have 8 kids selected to do the focus group. In your setting, Kay, where you're dealing with a population that's not captive, they're not in the school for you to be able to have access to through any personnel, you almost have to do what street solicitors do when they're trying to sell a product or get people to participate in a sale for cologne at the store down the street. They'll have some lowly paid people handing out cards, and on the card it says you can earn $5 or $10 or get this gift card for giving us just 30 minutes of your time. Go to www.such and such and check in. That's one way. You can just solicit them by having somebody hand out little information cards that give them the address where they access you and find out that they can get a gift card for participating in this focus group. Other than that, it would be generating lists that you could buy from FaceTime or Google or Instagram or whatever of people within your demographic, your age, region, zip code, what have you, and then cold email them or text them with solicitations to participate in a focus group. That may be more expensive. I don't know the costs of such things myself, but that would be another way to do that. And short of being able to do that focus group, I would do some interviews, select some people that I would do interviews with, even if it means doing that in person. I'm on the street with my face mask on and a clipboard and interview some of the target audience to ask them some of what you're asking me. How would I reach you if I wanted to get you to participate in this group, and see what their responses are. The interview process is a bit time consuming, but in an afternoon you can interview 20 people, and that's like 3 focus groups almost, where you can get feedback about what it is you're attempting to do and their ideas or responses or proclivities for participating. Those are the ones that I get off the top of my head.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
We have another question in the question box. I don't know if you can see them or not, Michael, but if you want, I can read it out loud.
I'm not seeing them, so please do.
Okay. It says, let me start off. Okay. A lot of students from our partner school don't have access to internet, so I'm going to explore some of the suggestions with the principal to see what is feasible. This is very helpful for us. And there was one prior to that. Let me get to that. Okay. We are supposed to start our survey data collection pre-social norms campaign, but we had to put on hold. We are hoping to start in the fall, but it is unclear whether or not the students will be back in the classroom. A lot of students from our partner school don't have access to the internet. There we go. That was part of the other message. So I'm going to explore some of the suggestions that with the principal to see what is feasible. This is very helpful for us. Okay. So I guess it wasn't so much of a question as it was a comment.
All right, that's good to know. The using the school to access the survey data, be it through SurveyMonkey or some other technology, a Google application or what have you, is very realistic and usable alternative to a pencil paper survey in a classroom or a homeroom or an intercept survey in a cafeteria or what have you. As I was brainstorming myself and thinking about things, I was thinking about, besides the obvious social media, which I don't know as much about as my son and daughter do. My son works as an e-commerce analyst and director, so he knows all sorts of things about social media, but he's all around selling real products, not our health products that I'm selling. He's selling Coach purses and what have you through internet sales. But direct mail, believe it or not, snail mail is another possibility. Postcards, we have examples of postcards. Let me see if I can show you some here that have gone out to parents, and these could go out to children as well as to parents. Or let me see if I can get to that. It isn't going. Okay, why is that? Well, let me just drop in here. I'll get to the postcards because they're part of this. Political campaigns is another something that I've been looking at as a possibility for how to reach people, because political campaigns are using multiple channels to try to reach audiences. They use phone banking, they use Facebook, Instagram, they use events, and rather they're virtual events rather than in-person events. So where in the past we'd have a health fair or an assembly or something to try to access people or get people in, have people get in a position to see our messages, if we could stage any type of Zoom event that may be interesting to the kids, where we could deliver our message to them. Political campaigns use direct mail. They use personalized postcards where they'll have a whole group of people sign postcards or even write them longhand with messages on them that are scripted for them, and that the personalized postcard is much less likely to be trashed as junk mail. It takes work, but it's something where not only can individuals in an office do it, but volunteers or parent volunteers that are part of a community coalition, or even some other students can participate in writing messages and then snail mailing them to your target audience. It's obviously something that's going to work better with smaller populations than larger populations. Some examples of some direct mail. Here's a postcard that was sent to parents. That was side 1. Side 2 has this information in it. We could be targeting parents as messengers by sending them postcards like this to have them communicate with their kids. We could send cards directly to the kids themselves with information in them. This was an ad that was in a local newspaper, like a shopper paper. That's the free paper where the auctions and garage sales and so on were announced. They got the publishers of that paper to give them free space to put ads in the paper once a week that reached out to parents or kids, but particularly the parents, because those are the people who read the free newspaper more frequently. This is another postcard. This was the front side. This is the back side. So they send this information. This information could go to kids. This information could go to parents. It could go to teachers. It could go to anybody in the community, but it would be going something you'd want to get to your target audience. Those don't look like very attentive parents, do they? But anyhow, here's another one. So you get the idea that there can be other ways than social media or electronic media to reach people. I did some work in some schools outside of Boston where there was a lot of local traffic, especially in the mornings and the evenings, at stop signs. And we heard in focus groups with parents that the way to reach people in their community was having little sandwich boards or like those political campaign signs at the intersections where people stop their car. You've probably seen those for where people have put up those temporary signs for garage sales or for roof repair or siding your house or so on. Those are there because they work. They don't put those signs up and spend the money on them because they don't work. They work. And that's another relatively inexpensive way to get messaging out to a community during this time would be to use those signs cost, I believe, around $1 a piece, depending on whether they're cardboard or plastic or whatever, to print. And then they could be put around the community at sites where your target audience is liable to see them. Right now, given the situation in many states, grocery stores would be an obvious place to intercept parents and or even students within your district or your region if you wanted to do an intercept survey or if you wanted to just provide information. Just some thoughts, brainstorming here. So other questions or comments, other ideas
Michael,
that you might have? Yes.
Michael, it's interesting that you said those signs, because the next question is, do you think yard signs would be a good way to share the poster campaign? Also, if we could get approval from school systems. So someone was also thinking about using the yard sales.
Yeah, the yard signs just have to be relatively quick reads. They have to have large print and very little of it. So they're going to have to be things like most of our kids don't use marijuana. Did you know? Or keep up the good work. Our kids are in our district don't use marijuana. And you can then in small print have the percentage if you wanted to put it there, and if you didn't have the issue that we talked about earlier with competing schools. But yes, I think those yard signs would be a very inexpensive way to provide messaging. And again, the smaller the community, the more effective they would be. Other comments?
I don't see any questions being typed. If anyone has a question, please, there you go.
Hey, Esther, this
Go
is
ahead.
Shannon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Esther. Hey, Michael. Shannon
Hello.
Lawson with the council. I was just wondering, and I have not delved into it, but was wondering if anyone on the call has had any experience. I know on Facebook you can promote ads or buy quote unquote advertisement where you promote a post. But I know our teens are not on Facebook, but thinking about Snapchat and Instagram, I have not looked at purchasing or promoting advertisement there. Is that still possible? Can you do that? Has anybody had an experience with those? And maybe you could take your social norm messaging to those two sites to reach the youth specifically.
I know you can. I don't know if
Okay.
anybody's done that, but you can.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say that, and I'm not very social media savvy, so I have a consultant that I work with that is better. So I would say talk to someone who is more familiar with the social media to see how to do that. Like Michael said, I think it's possible. I just don't know how. We have a couple options as well of people. So if you need someone outside of the agency, let me know and we can connect you.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a great idea. And what Esther was just saying about don't let the technology intimidation keep you from reaching your audience. There are people out there that know how to do that. It's just accessing them to give you a hand. And they're there in every community, and we just need to bring them on board as either paid or volunteer helpers or consultants to us to help us get from A to B. You know what your messages are, you know who you're trying to reach, you need someone to help you exploit the existent electronic media to be able to pull that off. Virtually any poster or leaflet, or even these things, these Stall Street journals that we did, which are popular with the kids, can be turned into electronic media so that we don't have to reinvent the content so much as we have to develop the channel. Whoops. I ended up at the end rather than the beginning or where I was. So we don't have to reinvent the content. We just have to be able to come up with various new ways to get the content from ourselves to the target audience. I don't know how many of you are at what stage in your, I mean, I've heard people talking about the data gathering stage, the information gathering stage, which is surveys, focus groups, intercepts, interviews, and then the message dissemination stage, which is the media, the banners, the billboards, the flyers, the direct mail, the social media. Are people all over the place, or are most of you at the point where you've done your formative work and you're now in the process of trying to get the information out there? Or are you still gathering information about where to go and what works? Somebody tell me.
Michael, I'm going to assume, based on the conversations that I've had, that people are at all different stages.
Okay.
And I think that's why the idea of this webinar came up is, you know, people are trying to figure out at whatever stage they are in the process how to continue this. I think someone mentioned, you know, we're almost at the end of the school year, so some of this won't happen until next school year if, you know, the students are back and everything is okay. But what can we do now to start working towards that? But I think everyone is at different points. Some people have already done their surveys and collected the data and just want to figure out how to get the message out there. And some people are at the beginning of it. If someone wants to mention or comment, if I'm not correct in that, please let me know. But I think everyone is at different points of the process.
Okay. Right now, virtually every school district has tech people on board who are clearly working double time to develop and use a variety of different electronic media and applications to reach kids and help faculty do the job of continuing the education that they're responsible to provide. That's another resource to use if you can. I don't know how much discretion you have within your budgets to even be able to hire part-time, certain number of hours, those types of expertise, the tech people that would help you reach student populations. I can't stress enough, though, of doing interviews or focus groups with the young people themselves, the people you're trying to reach, to just find out from them, is the social media that the school is using something that you would be willing to read my messages through? Would you rather get a postcard mailed to your home? Would you rather get the messages from your friends phone banking you or other students? Because we could use phone banking too, again, in small settings where you call people, give them the message, take some time from them. We might find out in a focus group that is so not going to work, that I'd hang up on you. It's worse than getting junk mail or spam email. But the only way we're going to know which of these ideas might be successful with our audience is by talking to our audience and listening to what they have to tell us. They they will have ideas that we don't have. They will be able to take the ideas that we do have and give us feedback about which are most likely to be effective and which are going to fail. And that saves us a lot of time and energy. The last thing we want to do is put together a very well-conceived, expensive message delivery system that doesn't work.
Michael, I wanted to share that one of the attendees shared that the students, that they use their school groups to promote the social norms such as Instagram and things like that. So using the students, maybe your youth action team or your sources of strength group to help promote as well. So that's something that was shared on the questions that I wanted to make sure you were mentioning other ways to do that. I also had another thought, if I may share, if someone else doesn't have a question right now. You were mentioning the grocery stores, and I'm thinking of what are things that people are doing now that they have to do. I mean, obviously school is not the best place right now, but you mentioned the grocery stores. I think a lot of the grocery stores, at least here in Georgia, some of them have those ads on the shopping carts, or buggies, I think people call them here. And so those messages, those places, maybe that's another way, another location that we could put the messages, because that is one thing that people are still going, and everyone is still, for the most part, going out to get their groceries is at the store. And so having a place there to put the message, and the shopping carts have that space.
Yes. You know, I was just thinking are people wearing face masks in Georgia?
For the most part, what I've seen, people are wearing face masks. It's not mandatory, obviously, but for the most part, and some stores actually have it posted where you can't go in without wearing a face mask.
Well, those are other novel sorts of things that people could consider doing. I would consider, I've noticed that we're starting to once again get coupons and shopper sorts of fillers in my newspaper that I get. For a while there wasn't any, but now there are, because the grocery stores obviously know that there's a lot of shopping going on in the grocery stores. And so those flyers that go in the newspaper where the coupons are, if we could get a grocery store to be willing to put our message on their flyer, either for free as a public service or for a fee, that would be another possibility. There are no shopping bags, so we can't put messages on the bags necessarily. We could put them on masks. That would be sort of an odd thing, but interesting as an idea. I do want to say, if you're using students to carry messages, it would be useful if they're identified. In other words, if they're making calls, or if they're sending out Facebook or Instagram messages or TikTok messages, whatever it happens to be, that if they're doing that in an organized way as part of a group, it'd be important in a focus group, or at least in some multiple interviews, to determine whether or not the visible students that you're using, or the group that's visible, adds value or is neutral to your message. We don't want our messages carried by any messengers that take value away from the message. And by that I mean, if our volunteer helpers, our kids that are helping to carry the messages, are perceived as goody-goodies or anti-fun kids, or whatever they want to call them, that could then hurt our messaging. And that's something to take into account, and is very easily testable with 6-8 interviews of various different high school kids, juniors or seniors, or a focus group. So that's something to keep in mind. We'd want to test whatever messengers that are highly visible. If they're not visible, if they're invisible, that's not really an issue. But if they are visible, and they're certainly visible if they make phone calls or send out text messages or emails that carry our information. So that would be something to keep in mind as well. Does anybody have any other novel way that they've had success with or have been considering to carry the messages out? Are there places like call-in places where people order pizzas in the community that are doing a good business that we could enjoin to carry our message? You know, a pizza box could have a message placed right on it, even just taped to it, that would have our information, so that whoever's eating pizza in the community is going to get our messaging and that could be done very inexpensively.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. This is Timberland Roby with BBHDB. I'm the architect of Region 5, and I know several providers, they're using food distribution places to put stickers on the bags, like Uber. I know that somebody did use Pizza Hut, and that's how they're getting their messages out.
Yes, great idea. The food distribution centers, you could have something in the bag, or you could have something that you could stick on the bag, like even just simple labels that you would use a printer for labeling that would have your messages on it that could be easily and cheaply stuck to the food bags at the same time. And it could be one of your staff does some volunteer work. They're stuffing food bags at the same time they're sending your messages out, so it's a twofer. That's a great idea. At sites where the community is gathering at any point in time, or is where you can intercept them with your message. That's the whole idea of banners and billboards. Banners have to have very few words, but can carry messages, and banners can be relatively inexpensively purchased or printed, and they could go up over the driveway into a grocery store parking lot. With the permission of the store, they could go up over the door, the entryway to the store, and they could be changed often because they could be as inexpensive as $50 a banner to print. Billboards are a lot more expensive, but they sometimes are donated even because they're billboards that are not in use. Not all towns have such a thing, but that's another possibility. I think we just have to become very creative and imaginative about how we reach our audiences. Other things that people have used, that was a great idea, the food distribution sites. I think with the way high school kids consume pizzas, I think the pizzas are pizza sites are a very good idea as well. Are there recycling centers where you could get the information out? Or is that, this is where I need to talk to my target audience. I want a focus group with 10 kids and do that 3 times and ask them, you know, you're locked down, where do you go? Do you go to parks? Do you hang out? Where do you get your food from, or where are you going for entertainment? I want to know those things to see if there's any way, because I would follow any of those questions up with, do you think that's something we could use to reach you with our messaging? See what they had to say.
You know, Michael, one of the things that people are doing now are using, in some communities, you can use Uber Eats, Grubhub, what's the other one? All these different types of food delivery places. And I don't know if there's a way to partner with them to get a message out there, or with the drivers they can staple, because the bags have to be closed, sealed up, and they leave them like in the front of the door for the no contact. But you were talking about where people are getting their food. There's a lot of delivery that doesn't come directly like from the pizza place, that comes from Uber Eats or Grubhub and things like that. DoorDash is the other one. Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions, Michael, and we're almost at 2:30. Does anyone have any final questions? Michael, do you have any closing comments for us?
Well, I can't reiterate enough that we have to find ways to elicit information from the kids themselves. How can we reach you? What channels would you be most likely to hear our messages? And throw ideas out in front of them for them to react to. What do you think about putting messages on pizza boxes? What do you think about stuffing messages at the food distribution center? What are the routines that you're doing on a given day or given week? How often do you go somewhere during the week, and where do you go? And is there a place where we could put a yard sign up and reach you with a message? I need to ask those questions and hear their answers in order to start developing my most effective expenditures of my time and money to get messages placed in front of them. And I think that's the most important thing is interacting with our audience to hear what they have to teach us. And I'd also test whether or not having teachers carry the message as part of their curriculum, if they would, from the school, and whether having parents carry the message so that parents could become part of our messenger system by eliciting their participation with things like postcards or the like. But with that, I think you just have to find ways to continue to get this type of message, the truth about the health and the assets of the kids in Georgia when it comes to making healthy choices about substances, which most of them are doing but don't know they are.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael, so much for your time for this webinar and the one that we had on Friday. I want everyone to know that Voices for Prevention is preparing to send out a special edition of our newsletter for Prevention Week, which is next week. So begin to look out this week for that newsletter. We are also working with Michael to put together a webinar on how to use positive social norms for suicide prevention. So we will be sending out more information about that as well. If you have any ideas of webinars that you feel that would be important for you to listen to or have, we are in the process of trying to schedule more of these. So please feel free to contact me directly, and I can forward, or I can take your ideas and see what we can do about putting together some webinars for you. Well, thank you again, everybody, for your time. And again, these webinars are recorded. We will have them on our website, and the handouts from Friday are on the website that I put in the chat box. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful week.